are there also some other challenges, particularly about the underwater environment?
In a couple of years, basically, the water quality so gets worse that at the end, during the missions, we have visibility hardly you are hardly able to see end of your hand. Having developing virtual fitness coach. So basically, imagine that you live in the area of 8 square meters and you live there for weeks.
Welcome back on the SpaceInfo Podcast. Here we talk about space and everything related to it. If you are passionate about space, astronomy, technology and everything about it, you can join all our social platforms at the SpaceInfo Club or our website at www.spaceinfo.club, where tons of content and a community of experts are there waiting for you. This is the SpaceInfo Club. Okay, so welcome everyone. Today we talk with Dr. Miroslav Rozloznik. I hope I pronounced it correctly. So welcome aboard.
Okay.
And
thank you for the invitation.
That's my real pleasure, and I think that it will be the pleasure also for the people who are listening, because if you want to introduce yourself, I think that today it will be a very special episode.
Okay, so as it was said, my name is Dr. Miroslav Rozloznik, and originally I come from Slovakia. My educational background is in environmental physiology, and I am expert in hyperbaric medicine. And I've been doing research on divers in different locations for more than 25 years maybe. And basically diving also brought me to the space activities. And since 2020, I've been involved in various analog space missions. Let's say I'm still involved in a HYDRONAUT project. I also have collaborated with Austrian Space Forum on their projects, and I'm a member of International Guidelines and Standards Association. So there are a lot of activities both in both worlds, so underwater and also in analog space missions. So that's about me in a nutshell.
I think that you mentioned a couple of words we are all attracted and very curious about. So maybe you'd like also to tell something about your current location, because for the people who are looking, there is a blue light in the backward, but I know that that's not let's say a usual room for normal people.
No, you are absolutely right. I mean, if people can see where I am, so actually I'm at the moment in a tunnel between the habitat and the AVA area. So currently I'm in Prague, in Little Moon City in Prague, where I'm basically in a 7-day isolation. So today is my 5th day of isolation, where I'm isolated with another 2 crew members. So we have 3 crew members isolated in our habitat. And so I found a place where I can be available for this podcast, because the habitat is currently in use with some other research activities. So that's my location at the moment.
I don't know if you followed the whole podcast, but we never recorded an episode from an isolated environment, and that's the very first time we are recording from such kind of thing. So that's also special for this. And if you want, we can start talking about the HYDRONAUT project, and maybe you'd like to tell us a little about what it is and why it's called like that.
So HYDRONAUT project is basically a project around habitat, which is very unique, because this habitat, which allows people to live in it, the habitat is hybrid. So it means it's operational both underwater and on ground. And actually, this habitat, which is currently located in Prague, as I mentioned, has spent 5 years underwater in one of the quarries close to Prague, where we have performed 3 analog space missions lasting between 2 days to 7 days. And of course, it's analog space mission underwater, where divers are in special type of diving. It's called saturation diving. And basically, during this type of diving, you cannot go directly to surface. So you need to stay underwater, you stay in the habitat. And of course, if you need to go to surface, like at the end of the mission, or let's say in case of emergency, then of course it takes you some time to get to surface. So that's high fidelity analog to compare to space conditions. And habitat, just to give you maybe an idea, because I cannot show you at the moment, as I said, it's in use. So habitat is basically the cylindrical shape, which is like 4.5 meters long and 2.5 in diameter. So the inner volume is something like 20 cubic meters. And what is very interesting is that the living area, surface area, is something about 8 square meters. So that makes us probably the smallest habitat worldwide. And as I said, habitat is operational both underwater and on ground. So since last year, we transferred habitat to Prague, where we have created Little Moon City, which is basically training and research facility located in the broader Prague city center. So it's easy reachable by all means of transport. Basically, you just fly in to airport in Prague, and in 20 minutes you can be in the habitat. So I think it's also quite unique because the other habitats are located in more let's say, remote areas. But nevertheless, I mean, our habitat is so special that despite we are in Prague, we can simulate fully what we want. It's fully isolated. So, for example, for me, I haven't seen daylight for 7 days at the moment. Of course, the habitat has artificial illumination, so of course it has impact on our circadian rhythm, so how our body works. And the facility, Little Moon's facility, consists from 3 main parts. So we have habitat as a central part, then we have a mission control, which basically takes care of the habitat, since the habitat is a representation of isolated, confined, extreme environment. Habitat operates or it needs a life support system to be functional. Otherwise, people cannot live inside. So operations are covered by Mission Control Center, which is again 24/7 operational and monitors inner atmosphere, environmental conditions inside the habitat, like temperature, humidity, oxygen, other gases, voltage in the system, etc. And then on the other side of the facility, we have a big cupola, which serves as a simulation of lunar surface. And actually, just like a few months ago, we developed a special VR program where we are using virtual reality to simulate lunar surface. And I'm quite proud to say that a few days ago, we had in a crew one of the real astronaut, who flew several times in space. And he tested the whole facility because he was a member of our mission. And he was one of the crew members, and he really appreciate that how our conditions are close to space conditions.
So congrats for sure. You're doing. I was already sure, but that's let's say an official sign that you're doing a great job, and so congrats again. And yeah, you mentioned the fact that that's an analog mission. So for everyone who's listening, maybe we could just let's say define what's the meaning of analog in this case.
So in general, before you go to space, or either as a human subject or as sort of technology or something like that, you either need a special training or the technology needs to be tested in a special environment, because obviously in orbit you cannot test it. You need to have a final version. So analog space missions are used for training of crew members, and they're also used for developing technologies for the space use. So basically, during analog space missions, you simulate various aspects of the space flight. Of course, it can be various objectives which you want to accomplish. For example, if you need to test a spacesuit, you have different objectives than, for example, like in our small habitat, which is basically sort of one of the modules, which, for example, might be flying to the moon or be located as a habitat on the moon in the next years. So because the size might be the size which will be then operational, you can test, for example, the effects of such a confined environment on the crew. So psychological, physiological effects, artificial light, as I said, maybe food. So there are a lot of applications where these analog space missions can be used.
Yeah, the fact that you mentioned the isolation thing and didn't really surprise me as much as the fact that you have not been seeing the daylight for such a long time. I've always thought that, let's say, how daylight influences our, let's say, ride and routine on a daily basis is something which is connected to our primitive instincts, something like that. So it must be very interesting to study and also being confined for such a long time, relatively speaking. So yeah, maybe are there also some other challenges, particularly about the underwater environment, we should know?
Yeah, so of course, underwater it's very specific because as I said, you are in saturation, so you cannot escape habitat in case of emergency, or you can escape, but it will take you several hours to get to surface. So basically, this mimics situation like in space, because also if something happens in space, it's not like you just call taxi and you go home or you go to hospital. It also takes some time. Maybe you land in some remote areas, so time to rescue might be, let's say, a little bit prolonged. And this kind of psychological effect we can simulate with analog space, which is underwater. So these underwater analogs are very useful for psychological research because you have a small space, you have a lot of people inside, it's extreme environment. So these are the variables which influence human performance and team cohesion. And therefore, underwater environment is a suitable environment to study.
Yeah, and something that which makes me really curious about them is, let's say, the common profile of the person which is, let's say, tested or at least analyzed during the mission. So you mentioned that an astronaut visited the facility and the service, let's say, the services or what you make. But in my mind, not everyone could react in the same way or could fit for that kind of, let's say, mission. So is that any particular profile which is, let's say, looked for when analyzing?
Yeah, I would definitely distinguish two capabilities of a habitat. So one is underwater life, where you really need to have very experienced people because it's a special type of diving. Of course, that's something what at the moment, for example, I'm working on. I work on development of special Aquanaut course, which would be suitable for let's say for advanced diver to be able to participate in such activities. So that's something that is in development. So diving is a special part. And then, of course, being now on ground, on surface, basically, it opens the door. So at the moment, we can really accommodate different psychological profiles, different nationalities. So people basically who do not have, they do not need to have diving experiences, so they can basically participate. And this, of course, broaden the options for possible researches which are conducted here.
Okay, and yeah, you mentioned the Aquanaut course, and also recall me the HYDRONAUT project you mentioned at the beginning. So yeah, maybe you'd like to tell us a little more detail about the HYDRONAUT, in particular the scientific research that you make over there.
Yeah,
I'm really curious.
yeah. So basically, I joined the HYDRONAUT project, as I said, like 4 or 5 years ago. Initially as a researcher. So since I have this quite extensive background and experience in doing research on divers in remote areas, including polar regions, then of course naturally I found this project and I tried to do research here in a HYDRONAUT facility, which of course then suddenly changed to an offer to become an Aquanaut and to become one of the crew members. So I participated in one of the missions as a scientist on board, where I conducted different researches ranging from physiology, microbiology, and I also performed with help of my colleagues. I performed also some psychological studies underwater on us as divers. And then in next mission, I supported the mission as diving safety officer. So basically, I was taking care of all diving safety operations conducted. So yeah, that was my involvement in terms of diving and with the HYDRONAUT project. And currently, my role in HYDRONAUT project is that I'm chief scientific officer. So basically, I manage the whole all research activities which are conducted at the moment in our facility. And I'm really quite proud that we already have established international collaborations with a lot of universities, like from Norway, Italy, Taiwan. So we are really becoming international facility and recognized by international universities as a very valid and high fidelity environment to study to study some of the isolation aspects on human body.
Yeah, indeed, this was something that I wanted to ask you while you were talking. Yeah, I was wondering if, let's say, the inputs from what looking for comes always from the, let's say, external counterparts like university or, let's say, independent researchers or maybe private companies even, or it happens that, let's say, you find out something or you say, okay, I want to look for this particular topic, or how does it usually
Yeah,
work?
it's actually, as you described, it's combination. So,
Okay.
habitat, you imagine it's basically sort of like, it's a vessel, right? So it needs to be equipped. It needs to be equipped with ventilation, electricity, maybe some heating system, air conditioning, and so on and so on. And this is basically the only facility like that in the world. So it means that everything needs to be developed. It needs to be really tailored for this type of habitat. So some collaboration just evolved like from our need. Okay, so we needed, I don't know, something special, and then the whole story started with some research activities. On the other hand, once we were more visible and people realized, okay, yeah, they can go underwater, they can stay underwater, and it's very nice to do some research. So we were approached by researchers asking, okay, can we do such a small study and bigger study? And, so it's basically, it's a combination of both.
Okay, and maybe you can, I don't know if you can, but maybe you can tell us something very interesting, some of the things that more interesting than others that happen during this activity.
Yeah, of course, you cannot talk about some studies because we have some confidentiality agreement with some researchers. So just to mention, for example, the currently running project here, it's called Virtual Coach, where we have been developing a virtual fitness coach. So basically, imagine that you live in the area of 8 square meters and you live there for weeks. Of course, your physical fitness will rapidly decrease but of course, that's something that we don't want. You need to somehow to mitigate it. And therefore, we are developing the special strategies, including hardware, software, and special exercises dedicated to basically to keep crew members' fitness level at acceptable level, to be able to perform activities which are required from them during mission. It's either AVA or maybe the final decompression or something like that. So this is one of the projects, for example, which is running at the moment. We also had like greenhouses on board during some of the missions. So trying to grow some plants, not only like to feed astronauts, but maybe also to assess their absorption capacity. Because if you are in confined space, of course, then carbon dioxide levels are increasing. So you need to have a special methods how to remove carbon dioxide, otherwise you can suffocate. So it's extremely very, very complex. But it's not only about that, about the research, it's also about the technology. So we have been testing different technologies, from private sector that they want to use in extreme environment. And basically we test them in our extreme environment to help them to develop. And since we are extreme environment, also the development is much, much faster because you really expose the device or instrument or whatever it is to extreme environment from the beginning on, which means that you accelerate your progress.
Yeah, I think that's very true what you say, that in the end, since once you need something with some kind of, let's say, urgency or with some kind, let's say, forced constraints from the external, that's probably where you in general perform better, and that's when you need to, let's say, deliver some kind of physical product or some kind of result. And yeah, I think that must be an interesting way to work, particularly in, let's say, in almost emergency situation. And yeah, now I'm thinking about the beginning when you mentioned the dimensions of the modules, and I thought, okay, that's not very big one, but probably like in space, you shouldn't consider, let's say, the 2 dimensions. But since you don't have gravity, you are moving, let's say, in 3 dimensions, you can use the whole volume. But then I thought, okay, this is a nice analogy, but that they probably almost the only thing differently from space is the fact that they have gravity. Well, let's say they don't have microgravity conditions. So yeah, maybe there are some other analogies or some other differences that I'm not seeing now.
Yeah. So for example, one of the analogies is, or let's say, I would call them maybe discomforts. That's the common discomforts which you experience in space and also on ground. So, for example, one of them is lack of privacy.
Okay.
Imagine that if you live in such environment, you have hardly time and place you can hide yourself. Of course, there are some places, and I already know some of them, but I haven't used them yet. Where you basically can take your 50 minutes if you need, to calm down or something, do some maybe meditation or something. But in general, you are sharing one compartment with the other people, and given the dimensions, you hardly go from one side to the other without touching someone else. And that's basically also in space. Imagine all these spacecrafts. They are relatively small, so it means that you always come in touch with someone else, and basically you are losing privacy. You are also monitored all the time. You are always on camera. You are monitored for mission control. For example, now I am wearing special devices which monitors my heart rate, respiratory rate, and some other physiological parameters. And that's something what also you need to consider, that at some point it might be disturbing. Of course, another point is hygiene. We have limited options here for hygiene, so it's the same like in space. You don't have like shower and such luxuries. Another aspect might be food. We used to use almost comparable food like astronauts use in space. So again, there are a lot of the situations which basically push you to be out of your comfort zone. But of course, if it's just one parameter, then probably you can tolerate. But if it's like more parameters, and then suddenly you experience yourself fully outside of comfort zone, then of course also your psychology starts to maybe behave in a way that you don't know or you haven't known before. And that's the benefit of such environment, because that's training, And if you now learn how to live in your absolute discomfort, then when you are exposed in reality, you will behave differently because you already know your feelings, and you will be more efficient and you will be more tolerant. So these are the training benefits of being in such extreme environment.
Yeah, also all let's say the concerts that you mentioned are also made me thought about the fact that they also come to you all of a sudden and all together. You cannot inject once at a time, and so that's also the reason why I was wondering before if there is a particular, let's say, psychological profile of the typical person that should be let's say inserted in that kind of environment. Does it ever happen that someone, let's say, goes crazy or has some sort of crisis in that environment, and how do you manage it?
Yeah. So basically, that's an extremely good question. Of course, you need to be sure that the crew members who are in habitat, they are capable to survive there, and not only like from physiological perspective, but mostly from psychological one. So, of course, we do rigorous selection process. We collaborate with psychologists. So every crew member who goes into the crew is assessed or she is assessed. And basically, we make a decision not only from psychological point of view, but also from medical point of view. So our flight surgeon or doctor who is associated with our facility basically evaluates the medical condition of given subject. Because you might have some limitations which do not allow you to join such experiments or such training.
Yeah, Now that we have talked about, let's say the inside of the people, I would like to, let's say, go outside and talk about, let's say, the water environment, and maybe we'd like to spend some words about something which is becoming more and more important, and people are more and more conscious nowadays, which is environmental conservation and also the marine research. So, is this topic present in, let's say, in the whole organization?
Yes, of course. And the best example is basically our project.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, Habitat was immersed in water like 5 years ago. And at that time, it was in one of the quarries close to Prague. And at that time, the visibility in this quarry was like nice, few meters of visibility, which was acceptable for operations. And in a couple of years, basically, the water quality so get worse that at the end during the missions we had visibility hardly like you were hardly able to see end of your hand, so this distance you were not able to see, which of course has huge impacts on operations and gives another complexity. And that's what we see as divers. And I am also a scuba diving instructor, and for example this summer it was really exceptional. I've been doing teaching for the whole summer of my students, and basically the water temperature was several degrees higher than usual. So this is everything what you see and you feel as a diver, of course. And we are talking about fresh water. In salt water, it's even more visible. We all know about the coral bleaching, and so on and so on, and also about the temperatures. I just recently talked to my colleagues in Egypt, and also they basically realized this year that the sea temperature was much higher than compared to the other years. So definitely the climate is changing, and we as divers we see it. We see it on corals, we see it on animals. So definitely we are cautious about that, because this is the environment where we like to be, and we want to keep it at the acceptable level.
Yeah, I think that while we were talking, I thought, okay, maybe a slight change in temperature is, I would say, normal, but that's something that could happen. We know that there are oscillations in time, but when you're talking about visibility and the fact that it changed so rapidly in a couple of years, this really surprised me. And yeah, I was saying that people in general are becoming more and more cautious about this need that we have of conservation and, let's say, also education on our behavior. So maybe the fact that there is even more public engagement in this kind of activity, at least from this point of view, is a positive thing. Well, I hope it is a positive thing, because what we are doing today and what I try to do with the SpaceInfo project is kind of aligned to this. So I don't know, how do you say the public engagement and education in general in this field?
Yeah, I would say different levels of involvement. Of course, we as divers, we do a lot of cleaning underwater. So in our region, for example, we do twice a year, we do cleaning of lakes. So we do it either underwater or around the lakes to clean all the waste which is being collected. We also do cleaning of some mountain lakes. Over the winter, people are just walking on the ice, and they drop a cup of coffee, for example, right? And then it stays in the snow, and then when snow is melted, then basically the cup is on the bottom of the lake. And of course, usually it's in the preserved area. So we as divers are helping quite a lot to keep environment clean. And another aspect is educational. And it's about the kids, it's about the young generation to understand these changes. And I think that in this regard, such habitats as we are, and maybe not so extreme, but let's say there might be some other options, really to explore underwater world is important, because when people see real, because if you talk, okay, the corals are bleaching, and you haven't ever seen a bleached coral, then it's difficult for you to understand. But if you show them, okay, that's the reality, so there should be some hands-on experience for the people to really understand the issue. And when you see it and when you feel it, and when it's better than just to hear about it.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that the main difference between people who try to educate, but just, let's say, in a sort of scholar way, saying, okay, this is something which is happening, look at the data, these are the things, and okay, things are happening, but you don't really have the feel of what's happening. But the fact, what you mentioned now, and also while you were talking about the temperature and visibility, well, just gave me the idea that something that you really see with your eyes, you can touch it. And yeah, I completely agree on the fact that if everyone could feel what's happening, it would just give a great amount of difference in the thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so maybe you also, okay, you have, let's say, a great idea of what's happening in the present, but maybe you also have built in your mind an idea of what will be the future, if you want to share some thoughts on this.
Future of what?
of let's say underwater habitats and the project like the one you are conducting now and research?
Yeah, I believe that the future for the underwater habitats is bright. I have been in many discussions with really very experienced people in this area, and we all agree that some activities is more efficient to be conducted underwater and stay underwater for a prolonged time and perform them. So therefore, I really believe that there will be more and more habitats, growing because it's nice facility where researchers can come. As we just discussed about corals, you can basically deploy an habitat close to special corals you want to observe, and such habitats allows you to stay there a long time. Because imagine as a normal researcher, you go there maybe during the day, the dive lasts several hours maximum, but you don't know what's happening there in the rest of the day. Or you go in the night, you don't know what happens during the day. And then it would mean that you will need more researchers, to be diving there, which is also another operational consideration. Instead of that, you may have a habitat there, and you have one researcher sitting there and taking observations, for example, or measuring something or whatever. So it's more efficient. And I think that's the future for this habitat, because also when you live there, then you better understand, and of course then you can propose also better mitigation strategies if possible.
Yeah, that's completely agree with your words. And again, the fact that people could see and experience what they're doing, what you are doing, is for sure something which is changing the perception, and also how people are educated from just say, okay, these are the data and you can read them and you can consult whenever you want from what you feel. So yeah, I'm so happy to have had you here today, and I want to say thank you for this amazing talk, and hope to see you next time.